Good evening, Dr. Asan and Ms. Ima. Here are Group 12 and we will be presenting our data story. My name is Jia Xuan and I'll be opening our presentation. Let's start off with some good news. As you can see in this pie chart of pass and fail types, the pass rate is quite even throughout, with around 90% of the samples falling under pass. Next, in the 100% stack bar chart, we find that around 50% of the samples contain at least one tablet that exceeds the deviation threshold of 5 to 10%. This is not ideal, and so our goal is to discover the potential factors for the deviation observed in the tablet production samples. Next, we further confirm that through a sunburst chart, where we find that even if tablets pass, they are still prone to deviation, as around 43.75% of all the samples have tablets that exceed the deviation threshold. This is not ideal, as ideally, none of the samples should exceed the deviation threshold of 5%.
Yeah. Thanks, Jia Xuan. So furthermore, in this line chart of average rate against X bar, we find that there are no observable patterns from the graph here. We expected the mean rate to increase or decrease linearly if the issue occurs over time. So we can conclude that this issue is likely not to be time-based. Next, we have a bit of a surprise here in this scatter chart of individual tablet deviations by time, as we find that even for time periods where all the tablets pass, the deviations between them are still fairly high. Ideally, they should all cluster towards the 0 to 1% range, but in this case, it's quite scattered. Next, we look at the possible causes of this issue, starting with temperature and relative humidity through this double line chart. We find that the numbers for these two factors over time is not ideal, as well as the temperature and humidity are inversely proportional to each other and increase or decrease over time. However, they are intended to be controlled factors and are not supposed to happen at all, and any fluctuation observed can be taken as an anomaly and a possible cause of deviations in tablet weight, of which we'll be looking closer into moving forward. Another possible cause comes from the information given to us. The focus will be on three important points: compressibility index, Hausner ratio, and granule size. These are all only barely passable and can possibly contribute to issues such as poor flowability.
So, moving on to the interactive dashboards that we have. These dashboards contain the graphs that we have mentioned earlier. So, this basically is a visual overview and a breakdown of the issue and to find any observable patterns and relationships between each other. So, the first dashboard here is filtered by the passing samples. As you can see here, the temperature and against humidity is still inversely proportional and appear to have no impact on the pass rate. So, noting this for later, we also see that the mean deviations here of the tablets adheres closely to the X bar, which is expected as passing samples will likely deviate less from the X bar. Moving on, the failing samples here. Again, the temperature and humidity graph looks exactly the same. It looks the same, similar, and they are still inversely proportional and doesn't show any meaningful difference, which further proves that the temperature and humidity are not a main issue. So, next, we've gained some insights into the pass and fail types in the previous dashboard. So we'll now look into the deviations, which may give us some further insights into the data. So from the analysis of the samples with no tablet deviation, we find that the temperature and humidity are also still inversely proportional, with no meaningful differences from before, and we also observe from the line of chart mean deviation that is expected. The deviations follow the X bar closely as well due to its relationship with passing tablets. And lastly, we look at the samples with one or more deviations. Again, temperature and humidity shows no difference in relationship or effect, and so we conclude that the deviations are likely in part due to factors outside of the data given, which is temperature and humidity. So it's affected by machinery issues, such as they can have such an irregular and non-time-based effect on tablet deviations. Okay, moving on to our consolidated findings. The samples show a high pass rate. Secondly, there's a similar number of samples with at least one tablet deviation with the samples with no tablet deviation. However, I believe we should maximize the samples with no tablet deviations. And lastly, within one sample, most tablets that pass still deviate from one another. Most factors should remain fairly constant within one sample, but the tablet weight should not deviate substantially from one another. So from that, there are multiple factors outside temperature and humidity that impact the mass of tablets, such as powder flow, particle size, shape, and particle size and shape distribution, and lastly the issues within the equipment itself. Yeah, that'll be all for us.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, so now we carry on to issue 1, which is particle size and shape distribution. So, as a summary, as we covered along earlier, the particle size distribution of 600 to 1180 microns is considered a relatively wide range. So, this is why we conclude that the factors are likely to have a significant impact on tablet weight, because larger or irregularly shaped particles can actually cause variation in content uniformity during the compression stage, resulting in certain differences in tablet weights. And especially due to uneven particle size, it can also cause excessive entrapment of air between the granules, causing the volume of the granules in each tablet compression to vary, which is again not ideal. So over here we can say that we conclude that particle size and shape distribution is indeed a main issue, as the particle size distribution can be improved. The current distribution of 600, again 600 to 1180 microns, is too broad. Ideally, it should be a little bit smaller, around 600 to maybe about 900 microns. Moving on to Nathan.
So for the second point about powder flowability, we observe that the compressibility index and Hausner ratio of the tablets are all barely passable. So some of the things that we noted is that the barely passable compressibility index indicates that the granules will not be able to flow smoothly in a uniform manner. Using excipients like gliders, it can help to reduce the friction between particles, which improves the flow properties of the granulations. Another way that we can do it is actually to change the steepness of the hopper. So the hopper, we want it to be more steep, because when it's steeper, it will actually result in, or rather when it's less steep, it actually results in funnel flow. And when there's funnel flow, the granules get stuck at the sides, so it's not able to flow uniformly. In contrast, when we have mass flow, where we have steeper hopper, with mass flow, it can actually help to improve the flowability of the granules. So our conclusion is that powder flowability is indeed a main issue, and it can lead to overfilling or underfilling of the dye, which can lead to deviations in tablet weight. Next point.
Okay, so this is a point that carries over from issue 2, and this issue with the equipment. So as Nathan mentioned a little bit earlier on, the angle of the hopper is important here, because if the angle is too shallow, it can cause a phenomenon known as funnel flow, as we covered a little bit earlier on, results in the granules sticking at the side of the hopper instead of flowing smoothly, so we get non-uniformity. And we've given a few examples here. This is not all of them, but it's a few examples. One possibility is also punch embossing. So the granules can stick to the punch, and along with poor tablet ejection could also cause the chipping of the tablet edges, which result in non-uniformity in weight. And the amount of excipients, mainly lubricants and binders, in the formulation can also exacerbate equipment faults. And all these factors, of course, will result in tablet weight deviation. And so over here we conclude that equipment issues is indeed a main issue, as the equipment used is likely to have either damaged or exacerbated the flaws of the Hugio tablets. Next.
For our last point, we'll be talking about temperature and humidity, which was provided in the earlier dataset. We determined that temperature and humidity do not significantly affect tablet weight, because we observe that no matter how we change the individual samples and the pass-fail samples, no matter how we filter it, we observe that there were no observable or significant changes in the relationship between temperature and humidity. Throughout, it remained inversely proportional. As such, we conclude that temperature and humidity are not the main cause of tablet weight deviations, but nonetheless, it's still an ancillary issue. It is still something that we should consider, and one recommendation to resolve it would be to install a humidity detector with an alarm system, so that it can detect when humidity growth goes beyond acceptable levels. And along with that, that will also help to actually detect temperature as well, because they are inversely proportional.
Okay, so to conclude, with our analysis and evidence from data, we conclude that the undesirable weight deviations from the Hugio tablets come from 3 main reasons. So reason 1 is the wide particle size and shape distribution. Reason 2 is the non-ideal passable powder flowability. And the third reason is issues with the equipment, etc., such as hopper angle. So for recommendations, over to Nathan.
So for the three reasons and the three factors that we mentioned earlier, we have three corresponding recommendations. For wide particle size and shape distribution, in order to address that, we will be using conical milling. Conical mills have a high capacity and they produce uniform particle size. As such, this can ensure tighter and more consistent particle granulation. Secondly, we can actually, to address non-ideal passable powder flowability, we will refine the formulation. How do we do that? We will use excipients. We'll use different kinds of excipients and we can investigate whether the amount of excipients are correct, whether the type of excipients are correct, and then we will be able to determine how this can affect uniformity of tablet weight. For our last point about issues with equipment, we can make the hopper angle steeper. As earlier mentioned, when the hopper is not too steep, we will have too much we will have too much funnel flow, which actually leads to non-uniformity. Making the hopper angle steeper can help to resolve flowability issues by ensuring that gravity and will push the particles down, and this can actually reduce the excess air and other issues with the tablet. Lastly, we'll go on to our ancillary issue on temperature and humidity, which despite not being a major issue, we still feel that it warrants some investigation, and it can actually be improved by installing an alarm system. So thank you so much for listening to our presentation.
Yep. Do you have any questions for us?
Any questions for us?
Start first. So you see your second point there, refine your formulation, right?
Yes.
Okay. You say you use different excipient, correct? We can read on that.
Yes, excipients included must be investigated and their application amount must be tweaked. And this merits further testing.
Okay. So how can your different excipient affect your weight?
It depends on the kind of excipients required, yes, because every tablet comes with its own different requirements. So some excipients are not possible with this Yu-Gi-Oh tablet, but that's up for the formulation side. And so yeah, the focus here is more on tweaking the amount of it as opposed to the excipient itself. So just the amount as of now. But again, it merits further testing. We cannot say for sure that this is 100% the issue, but we can say that this is an approach to it, towards resolving it.
So we know for each tablet, there's always a fixed proportion of excipients to be used. So by tweaking these different proportions, we know that we can actually do further testing and we can ensure that it will have higher uniformity by using test data that we have actually formulated with this dashboard.
In effect, repeating this process.
So what kind of excipient do you think needed to test the uniform weight?
So there's binders, lubricant, there's starch and sugars as well that can be used.
This one is the dominant one to ensure the weight is homogeneous.
Binders, yes.
Okay. I'm not saying right or wrong. Okay, one more question. You mentioned about air trap, right? Air trap.
Yes.
Granules will affect your weight, right?
Yes.
How can air trapping inside the granule can affect your weight?
Yes, sorry.
So when there's air trapped inside, when it tries to fill the die, when there's air trapped inside, it will actually make it such that it will not be consistent because there will be different amounts of air inside, and because the die has a fixed shape, fixed volume.
Yes.
So there's air inside. Air takes up volume as well. So when you put whatever you want to put inside the granules, then you will have issues because your air is
Occupying volume.
some of the
volume.
Yes, correct.
Quite logical. But now there's another problem. We have a pre-compression roller.
Yes, correct.
So the function of pre-compression roller is to remove the air trapped in granules. So this won't be a problem anymore, right? Because our leveling machine got a pre-compression roller.
But in this case, it's not given, or it's not the information is given to us that we have a pre-compression roller. The information is not given.
In my animation, you'll see.
Yeah, but it's not given directly from here. Yeah. As bad as saying, okay, this is not given. But But okay, sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah, but for this thing is another thing that we can include as well.
So you
It-
assume no
the assumption is that there isn't.
No break.
Yeah, the assumption is that there isn't. However, of course, that may change. Alright, and if it does change, it's enough factor to factor in as well. But we're working under the assumption that there isn't.
Okay. Thank you. Enough.
Yeah. Miss Iman?
Yeah, Miss Iman.
You go to a chart about temperature. Okay, so for this chart, right, can I ask you the y-axis of both sides? Right?
Yes.
Not me.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Yes. Is there a reason why you start where you start? Oh, the y-axis.
Experience. This doesn't work. Okay, I mean the logical answer is because if it starts from zero, then the deviation won't be like as obvious as it is here. Because you can see like the deviation is huge. If it starts from zero, assuming this is zero, it will be just like that. Then you cannot
Two
see.
lines, very
Yeah,
small.
because there's not really-
What will happen to the few lines?
The two lines is like it won't be. It's not like that. It's like that. So like you cannot see. Then compress. If you cannot see, then you cannot really like identify if there's a relationship.
So we are zooming
Yeah,
into
like
this
can see,
portion.
then can see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In a way, if you do this, and many times when you do this, it becomes very misleading. Because your range becomes very small. So think about it, if you have started at zero, and like you say, the two lines will be very flat.
Yeah. Yes.
Doesn't it? Then tie in nicer with your conclusion that there is no, it
In
doesn't
case
affect.
like people can't see that it is actually crossing each other instead of
There's
being
a
very
line,
flat.
there's a very fuzzy line between people can see, can't see versus actually when you do this, it can mislead. You understand?
That's why like
Yeah.
on top of that we also have these cuts thing. To
Yeah,
like
so
identify
that's why I say perhaps to tie in nicer with what you conclude, right? That there's no that it doesn't affect basically, Perhaps, you have started with zero and you see the line, the two lines are very flat. It would have tied in nicely even more for you. Yeah. Okay. Yes.
I mean
And
that's why we
but
have to-
ultimately, this is resolved with the cards.
I can see it.
Okay. Yes,
So,
please do.
because we also have these cuts thing. So if like
Yes.
assuming we want like a specific time point, right, we
Yeah,
can see
yeah.
the average temperature
Yes.
will always remain consistent. So that's how we like fix it in a way.
Yeah, but in terms of looking for a relationship,
Yes, that's whole chance and
Okay, understood. Thank you for your feedback.
Thank you. Actually, I think that's all.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Good job. Good job.
Thank you very much, Dr. San.
Thank you very much.
Miss Iman.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh. All right.